it's very interesting because, as I mentioned in my introduction, it was the International Astronautical Congress in Paris this week, and they just one big, huge chunk was dedicated to Earth observation and how space can help us solve or address climate change. And I'm positive that what they have in mind and what you have in mind might overlap a little bit, but not entirely necessarily. So now I'm opening the floor to everyone. Maybe you want to ask each other or react to each other presentation, or maybe someone has got comments, questions, remarks. We have plenty of time. Don't be shy.
I immediately had a...
You have to press the button.
I have to press the button. Technology.
Yeah, technology.
I immediately very much resonated with what you were saying around the thinking of the reflection of Earth and sky. The reality is, coming back to the notion of a planetarium show, is you sitting down looking up, and then at the same time you're studying what's beneath your feet. And very often the large scientific pursuit projects that one comes across, especially as an artist working at that intersection of society and artistic practice and trying to affect some kind of, or make some kind of impact beyond the studio, is that I often ask the question, what happens below the telescopes? What happens in the shadows of the observatories? What happens in they're investing millions into the development of the square kilometer array in the Southern African region, and yet I can't find a community project that has got a meaningful, in-depth research that tells the story of the people underneath these satellite dishes. The square kilometer of satellite dishes, and you can't finish your housing. And so there is this constant challenge that you have in the contexts. I'm not sure about Texas. I've been there once, and it was an incredible experience because, conditionally, I don't know it. But I know that within the scientific pursuit projects within the Southern African regions that I've visited, there is always this reflection issue, but it's a social reflection. It's not necessarily a trying to find meaning and pursuing some kind of knowledge, but it's the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Those that have knowledge have more knowledge, and those that don't have are really trying to make sense of why there are these dishes in their spaces. And it's not really always being translated in an effective way. And so I think there's something interesting to be said about the need to create those string connections between the two in much more effective ways. So just a comment to acknowledge what you're saying, and I completely understand it.
Yeah, and I'd love to ask you also to react to your performance. One dream I always had was, and it's a dream that was shared, for instance, by 17th century astronomers and thinkers that I've been studying, was how to create an object that would be able to capture rays of light from everywhere on Earth. And this is Robert Hooke. I'm obsessed by Robert Hooke. He's a micrographist of the 17th century. And he says, I dream of a machine that would allow me to see everywhere. And what we had today was precisely the dream of Hooke. So thank you so much for that. And Hooke is the one who studies microscopic things, but he also puts in his book, Micrographia, images of the stars. And again, there is this connection between the tiny and the very big, which you managed to create with your performance. And what I liked very much, not as a researcher this time, but as a theater director, what I found fascinating was the relationship to time. There is something happening in this, the fact that we share a time with people very remote, and the way, because it's performance, the way it's improvised, the way time unfolds. I was really interested in knowing a bit more, because there is something very organic. They do perform together.
Well, I think it's the improvised that holds that. So the fact that, just a bit of background, the fact that everybody has a sense of their tools and their space, Interestingly enough, the one connection that kept on falling out was Minay, who she's busy driving into the Limpopo region, which is a very remote region that doesn't have very stable internet. And even though she drove it yesterday, and she, and there was a sense that there is enough connection today, there wasn't. But in her contribution, she said, my studio will be in my car, and I'm going to point my camera outside of the window. And luckily, I'm not driving someone else's, but I'm going to show you the landscape and then see how I can draw on the window to talk about my experience of this journey that I'm on, just like you're on a journey. And again, that compression of her movement from one place to another, while another person is sitting in a small 5 square meter room, composing something and going from one corner to the next, like in a cage. Those are compressions of space, but as you said, also the compression of time in terms of that relationship. And what's been fascinating to me is when this project has started to cross time zones. We've had screens of about 30 participants. So you can imagine this kind of conundrum of trying to make sense of a kind of cross-section of time. And when you start realizing that the participation didn't stop. So, I would schedule a 40-minute experiment, and an hour and a half later, people were in the zone, and the audience was starting to participate and turn off their lights. So I would say to everyone, turn off your light at home so we can make it a collective dark space. So even if it's daytime, throw a blanket over your head. And suddenly we all shared a space that actually only existed in that virtual connection. I'm just referring back to that thing that pulls all the light and becomes one. And the most rewarding component of all of that was how the audience responded, because the audience became the participants. And I realized that there's something quite valuable in this tool. Unfortunately, Zoom has been killed for all of us because we're all sitting in thousands of meetings, because we're doing home office and all of that. But actually, as a tool, as a creative co-sharing tool, it's become an incredible compression of time and space to create an alternative sense of time and space. And I'm not letting go of it yet, even though everyone tells me not another Zoom meeting. I'm kind of holding on to this ability to play with this tool in various ways. And its accessibility. So as long as you've got a bit of airtime and a bit of electricity, it brings it together. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I don't know where. Give you my microphone.
Well, hello everyone. It's really exciting to be here today in an art science event, and I got the information through the Ecole polytechnique and the art science chair. So I participate in some of the projects and ongoing things there. I think Mark can tell from my accent where I'm from. But I'd like to say I was very excited about what you showed, and I have a specific question related to that. The reason I'm excited about it is because I also experimented with 6 different artists right across Europe during COVID, doing exactly that. And we were leading workshops for each other with artists from 2 different disciplines, running workshops for 3 hours. And we did this with students across 5 universities of Europe. And it was a really exciting project. And we also met in real time once, but that was once. However, we never got to the hybrid stage. Which we are very curious about experimenting with. And I was wondering how and when you brought in the audience, and when you started experimenting with hybrid, or was this like this residency, this project? Yeah, the first opportunity.
This is the first one.
Oh my God, I'm totally moved. Really, I am. Congratulations.
So Fatou's been part of the other ones on the screen, and I mean, she should be sitting here with us right now, but I think with the English-French translation, we might run into, but so her presence was always on screen. So for me also to see her performing in physical space and sitting opposite her on the stage, I intentionally didn't get up and join her. I mean, I was tempted to, but I thought, there is this invisible barrier that still exists. And now, hopefully we can bring more people off the screen into the physical world. But I think it's important to continue shooting the image back. Anyway, yeah. Yes. So when I say audience, for me, It often blurs. Perform and audience sometimes become one in my work. So I often provide the tools and the audience participate. So in the virtual world, the audience became the participants. So I actually gave instructions. I said, everyone do this. And then I could see who was and who wasn't. Some people just sat back and wanted to watch, but there was actually a large amount of people that then joined the so-called performers. And then it blurred it completely. And essentially what should happen in the new hybrid version is that we get rid of all of these chairs, and that will be the next version, hopefully, and where the audience can really then also feel like they're in a studio setting, because I think that's important.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
I think that's also part of the process, opening up the studio and the discovery. Just like you're saying, you immerse yourself in a landscape or in a place where you try to articulate something. You can only do that by doing. You can theorize as much as you want, but you have to actually get your hands dirty to do something, to feel connected to it.
I actually have 2 comments / question that are not related. The first one is about this space imaginaries, which is, I discovered with, I mean, please, people would know me, don't laugh. I discovered with this event and preparing Global Periphery how my own biases, how I had things engraved in my brain. And I think that with the space imaginaries, which you touched upon a little bit, Frédérique, there is on the one side the astronomy, with a picture of the universe and basically now James Webb Telescope and before Hubble, that are some of the iconic images. And the other side is astronautics, with satellites and the International Space Station and cosmonauts and all the space romanticism that goes with it. But it's very rare that the two are combined. They are in a way 2 parallel imaginaries. There is also now the Earth viewed from above, with all the satellite images are just invading our imaginaries again. And from what I saw in this performance, there's another one imaginary, which is the one that is in the making somehow. And when you were saying, Frédérique, that we are still very much embedded into the old classical space imaginaries of power, conquest, exploitation, and going there, you know, it's like go west young man, so it's go to space young man. So I mean, this is for me one of the key questions is how do we produce a new space imaginaries that would be something different from the iconic imagination that we have. And again, this is not easy. I mean, because we are carrying with ourselves already so many images from when we were little kids somehow. So I don't know if you have any. It's just more of a comment than a question, but.
Basically, I don't have the answer for that, but the way we try to tackle that is a bit philosophical, and I didn't say anything about that, so I just add that basically the reason why this imaginary is so powerful is it's first of all because it's beautiful, because it makes us dream, but there is also something we try to tackle is the philosophical background of that, which is freedom. Basically, there is this idea that, but it's a certain conception of freedom. And what we try to do with this viral show with Latour is to understand what kind of conception of freedom is linked to those images. Freedom as a how to free yourself from constraints, how to free yourself from limits, how to free yourself from the earth, from everything that links you. And the reason why this imagination, in rock music, in science fiction, in cinema is so powerful is not only aesthetic. It's a link between aesthetics and philosophy. It's a link between a certain conception of freedom, which is biased, which is just, and a certain type of aesthetic. And so again, I'm not answering your question here, but I'm just saying, let's try to record and take into account the power of this imagination first. And then maybe we can go back to the background of that, and then we can invent another one. But it's a slow process in a way. Yeah.
I'll let you go into vulnerability.
Yes, thank you. I think no, you took my punchline away. In response to that, the play with freedom or this idea of, yeah, I think that's something. What's struck me in one of the programs when we were working on the planetarium show, and we were talking about, we were in Sutherland at the observatories, and we spoke to a group of youth about what this thing was that was happening there in these domes. And the response was so interesting, because the one person said, "Oh, they're studying the Big Bang, but we don't know what it is. But we know that it must be something good." You know, it's this notion that we've been sold something, and we can only celebrate it because it's been given to us in a certain way that it is a good thing. But when you start asking questions, like, for example, for this performance, to the same participants to say, how can you dreaming of space? What does it mean to create an imaginary space? Or how do you, the first question was, what is the most iconic image of space? And then what could a space culture be? And so the one person responded to say, well, I can only really dream of space and think about these things when I have no electricity, because that's when the lights are off and I don't have to watch TV and take all the rubbish that is being sent to me. And the other one said, well, actually, that's the worst time for me, because I'm so scared of all the conditions that I have to deal with that I cannot dream. And so I think it's very much contextually charged. I think the way that we read space, the way that we understand the image that is being sold to us is very much rooted in the cultural appropriation of the concept, but also in one's own experience. So light as a simple thing could be a good thing, because we assume everyone wants light. But if you've been living under a certain kind of oppression and light has been the thing that's been spotted on you the whole time, and you haven't been able to get away from the light because it's all about observation, then suddenly that notion of light is a bad thing. So it's that same game, I think we will struggle to play. And I struggled with it going to the Congress, walking through all of these amazing technological advances, and at the same time feeling completely overwhelmed that I felt vulnerable, in the sense that I realized there's so much science, so much money, so much resources that is being thrown at the problems that we think we're facing and that we have to solve. But actually, it all feels rather hopeless at the same time because of the real conditions that are around us. So it's a two-edged thing, and I think context is really, for me, an interesting thing. And that's why, coming back to this, it's so nice to draw people from different places into one.
Yeah, I think a dialectic between freedom and vulnerability could be a nice driving topic. We're going to have a last question before the break.
Okay, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I just wanted to maybe just comment on what Annick mentioned and reference what you were both saying about this idea of parallel imaginaries. So I've worked a lot with amateur astronomers in Delhi. And one of the most interesting things is this sort of schizophrenic, almost, well, I shouldn't use that word, but this sort of this dichotomy between images that saturate our imagination, 4-color, 4K separated images, Cassini, Hubble, all of this. And then the first time you go on an observation and you look through a telescope yourself, I curated an observation with people who have never seen through a telescope before. And it's always Saturn that sort of, takes center stage somehow. And somebody commented that, as an experience, it's very frugal, where suddenly you look through the telescope and your first reaction is anticlimax, and you think, is that all? And then you have the amateur next to you who says, well, okay, hang on. The light that you're looking at left Saturn 79 minutes ago, and now it's hitting the light receptive photons on your eyes. So as an experience, it becomes both collective, which is what you've mentioned as well. It's shared, but it's also deeply visceral and personal. And I think one of the reasons I think amateur astronomers are so interesting is because, again, it's a question of access. It's a question of making do with what they have. And I think they also just remind us, we should look up. But just lovely. Just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to thank both of you and all Marco's team